pile of books over here is becoming quite precarious. Oh, there goes all the books. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate, and today I thought we'd talk about the books that I read in 2023. I hope that you have all had a wonderful festive season and a special time doing the things that you love, and I have spent most of my time reading, which has been so wonderful, but it does mean that it's time to wrap up my 2023 books, and I am so excited that I managed to finish off my 21 books that I had listed out on my 2023 TBR at the start of the year, so we'll talk about those. I think this is going to be quite a long video, so grab yourself a beverage, anything that you would like to drink, and settle in, and let's talk about some books. So I have all of my books that I've read this year listed out in my Golden Quill Planner. This is one of the templates that they have, which is a reading list. And I think I'm just gonna fly through these as quick as I can so this video isn't as long as it probably is going to be. So let's start off. So the first book that I read this year was The Sellout. I really enjoyed this book. I think it continued it over from 2022. I started in 2022 and I continued it over into 2022. It is a satire. It's really clever. It's very well written, very thought-provoking. But it's maybe not a book that I think everyone would enjoy. I think that it's great. It's very, very well written. I think it won the Booker a couple of years ago and highly deserves that, but I would definitely check it before reading it. It's not something I would absolutely recommend to everyone. The next book that I read was a combination of Jane Austen's The Watsons, Lady Susan, and Sanditon, and I think this was my first book on my 2023 TBR. Absolutely loved it. Austen is brilliant. The satire was great. The irony was great. And particularly Lady Susan was one of my favorites. The next book that I read was The Memory Police. I think I actually have that one here somewhere. I'm surrounded by books, by the way, in case you were wondering what's going on over here. Memory Police. Yes. This book was really great. I really enjoyed it. Really great dystopian novel. Brilliant, engaging, wonderful plot line. What did I write about it? Great interior thoughts on it and questioning the sense of reality in the self, which I thought was really, really great. I'm trying to remember now. I didn't like the ending of this, but I couldn't remember why. Bless me. I don't think there was any other way for it to end. So, but yeah, great book. If you're into dystopian works, then I would highly recommend picking this up. I think, yeah, shortlisted for the 2022 International Booker Prize. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, would recommend for dystopian lovers. Next one. The Lost Children's Archive. I do have this with me. Lost Children's Archive. I believe it won the Dublin Literary Award or the Dublin Book Award. Can't remember exactly. Is it the Irish Literary Award or the Dublin Literary Award? I can't remember. But it won some kind of award there, and such an interesting structure for this book. It has a very diverse narrative style where it talks, it's kind of partially narrative, it's partially recorded, it's partially reflective notes written, it's partially read from another book, but it's also, I mean, the subject matter of this book is quite disturbing and quite difficult read for some people, so I would definitely have a look at that. Let's see what I've written here. Very emotionally draining, but cleverly constructed and interesting to read. Absolutely, I really, really enjoyed reading this book. I can see why it won, but definitely not a book for everyone. Next, Pachinko. Oh my goodness. Okay, I loved this book. This was absolutely one of my top 5 reads of this year, or my 5-star reads of this year. I loved this book. I breezed through it despite it being like quite a chunky book. Intergenerational migration, about the sort of tensions between Japan and Korea, and it's phenomenal. It's such a good book. Really, really highly recommend reading this book. Should I do like my top reads of 2023? Maybe in the next video. Let's tap that one on. Okay. The next book that I have here is Ulysses, which is all the way up there. I've spoken about this book more than enough in my channel. You know I love it. It's absolutely amazing. Ulysses by James Joyce was one of the best books I've read this year, but also ever in my entire life. So I'll just leave it at that. All About Love by Bell Hooks. I don't have this book with me. Where is it? Oh, I lent it to my mum. I enjoyed the first couple of chapters of this book. Obviously, it was written quite a fair bit ago, and I loved the first half of it. I found the second half could have benefited, obviously, from more up-to-date research, but suffice it to say that for 20 years on, this book was really interesting to read and really kind of insightful. So I'm glad that I read that. Next one that I have is Pew. I do have Pew. Or do I not have Pew? Pew by Catherine Lacey. No, I don't have Pew. I lent that to a friend. This is another one of my best reads for 2023. I absolutely loved this book. It was brilliant, original, relevant, completely just all-encompassingly so well thought out and so brilliantly executed, and just one of those books that I think you could apply to a number of different circumstances. So I really recommend that book. Would it be one of my top reads of the year? I think it would be. But, you know, this is definitely setting it up for the next video. Stay With Me. Literally, and on the book. It was a bad joke. Okay, Stay With Me. I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed sort of the unknown element that you kind of only come across right at the end of the book. It's a relatively easy read, but its interactions with motherhood and marriage are really palpable and really quite invoking and profound. So I highly recommend this book, and I recommend the author. Her new book was released this year and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. So shortlisted, longlisted? Longlisted, maybe, I can't remember, for the Booker Prize. But yes, highly recommend. What did I say about it? Where am I? This is the only thing about this planner, but maybe if I opened it up like a normal person, it wouldn't be so difficult. Heartbreaking Love and the Pain of Love. Yes, 100%. It can be really heartbreaking at times, but I so enjoyed this book. A Ghost in the Throat. Oh my goodness, where is this book? One of my favorite books of the year. There it is. Hold on. One of my favorite books of the year, if not my favorite book of the year. A Ghost in the Throat. Irish text written by an Irish author. It's a feminist text. It's about, again, about motherhood. It's about love. It's about female history. It's about written history. It's about non-written history, about Ireland and women in Ireland, and it's absolutely amazing, and every single person in the entire world should read this book. I just loved it. I ended up writing one of my essays on it, and I just think this book is absolutely fantastic. Definitely one of my best reads this year, if not my best read this year. Absolutely incredible. Okay, next. Death of Vivek. Really really enjoyed this book. I know a lot of people have strong emotions toward this book and they cried in this book, and I get that. I didn't cry in it, but I do think it's an absolutely fantastic book for everyone to read, to understand different perspectives of the trans community. And I just think it's a really, really fantastic book. It's not very long. It's really interesting to understand the identity behind people and how they perceive themselves. And I think it's really, really quite a brilliant book, and brilliantly written. What did I say about it? Multiple perspectives of the trans transformation, heartbreaking but beautiful, in love. And I totally agree. I have to reflect back on my notes to remind myself what I said, you know, months and months ago. But yes, so definitely a good read, would recommend. Whereabouts, where is it? I do have Whereabouts here somewhere. Whereabouts, another one of my best reads for this year. I just thought this book was atmospheric, transformative, so engaging, but so different at the same time. I mean, the narrative style of it is quite simple. It's a first person narrative as this woman kind of takes us through her life, but the interplay of her memories and her reality are so beautifully done and so beautifully written. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic book, and I think I breezed through it because it was brilliant, and I will 100% reread this. But Whereabouts was definitely one of the best books I think I've read this year. I did pick up her other book, Interpretive Melodies, which I'm really excited to read. I think that one's more popular or more well known, so I'm interested to see how that compares to this, because this book was chef's kiss. It was amazing. Babel. So many people love this book, and I can understand why. This book is so brilliant. The storyline is fantastic. The interplay of legacy colonialism in this book is so great, and I love this book. I thought it was so great. It was so interesting to read. I loved the story. I loved the setting, obviously it being in Oxford. Did I have some quips with the writing? Yes, I did. Did it really matter in the overall effect of the story? No, it didn't. I think it was just a great book and highly enjoyable. And yeah, I see why it's so popular. I get it now. I do get it. All right. Next, The Love Hypothesis. Oh, yes. Wow. It took me a while to remember which book that was. Such a fun, lovely, easy romance, you know, kind of not really smutty, a little bit of smut, but it was a good, fun read, and I read it like in a day. A fun, easy read. I loved it. It was good. It was, yeah, there's not much else that I can say about it. I'm not a big romance reader as it is, but this was a nice kind of ease into, or a light kind of read to kind of just break the intenseness of my reading list. And that's something that I did notice in my 2023 TBR list, is that I read a lot of very heavy, a lot of very emotionally intense books, and I definitely want to build in some not so intense reads in my 2024 TBR, which I will record in another video. So we are getting through it. Okay, Getting Lost, Annie and Roe. I do have that. Where is that? One second. All right, Getting Lost, Annie and Roe. This was a interesting sort of narrative. I really enjoyed the storyline behind it, and it's obviously written as journal or diary entries throughout a year or a year and a half. I can't remember exactly. It did get a bit repetitive, obviously because it is a diary, but the feelings in there and the the raw emotion are really quite profound, and I enjoyed reading that. I enjoyed getting to experience someone else's feelings and finding sort of an affinity to them in particular ways, which I think was really, really great. The only thing I would say is that it's slightly long and drawn out, but there are some absolute golden moments in this book. And I am interested in reading more of Annie and Rose stuff. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year. So I would love to get into reading more works of hers. This is obviously the first one that I've read, and so we'll see. Maybe next year I'll pick up some more. The Lonely Londoners. Again, one of the other books I left on the shelf. Lonely Londoners, an absolutely incredible account about the Windrush generation and varying narrative voices and that kind of thing. And what did I say about this? An incredible narrative with native dialect, brutal in a subtle yet effective manner. 100%. I so agree with me. The Mermaid of Black Conch. Why don't I collect these books? Why did I not bring them to the forefront? It's very poor form on my part. Mermaid of Black Conch. I love this. Absolutely love this. Feminist, environmental, folklore, set in sort of the Caribbean, but just so incredible, packing so much into such a small book, and a interesting story, and something that kind of leaves you feeling slightly uncomfortable, but for a good reason, because you start to question so much about yourself and your environmental habits. I mean, I just think it is such a brilliant, brilliant book, and I highly recommend that everyone read it. I also just love these vintage earth covers. This is the only one I have, but I'm desperate to get some more. A Court of Thorns and Roses. Yes, I did it. I read ACOTAR. Well, I read the first book. And my thoughts, I think, are the same as everyone else's thoughts, in that I thought it was absolutely awful until about the last quarter of the book, when everything kind of came together. And again, it was just an easy read. It was fun. It was exciting. It didn't take me very long to read at all. And it was just a nice break from the heaviness that I've been reading throughout the year. Will I read the next one? What is it called? A Court of Mist and Fury. I have it on my bookshelves. Yes, I probably will read the next one. Am I going to become one of those big ACOTAR fangirls? I'm not sure. But I get the hype. I understand it. I'm with you. I see you. I recognize you. You ACOTAR fans out there. And it's good. You do you. You have got it. You're grand. Okay? We're halfway through. We're on to the next page here. Okay. Next one that we have is If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. What an interesting book. I mean, the whole thing about this is that it's got a completely different narrative style, and it kind of interplays with different stories and different perspectives. You're not really sure what's real, what's not. It's all about the idea of writing and the relationship between writer and reader and publisher, and it's a fascinating, fascinating, fascinating book. Do I love it as much as some people do love it? No, I don't think so. I don't think I can get on board with the writing, but I don't know if this Calvino is unique in its narrative structure, and maybe I need to try some of his other work to kind of get onto the Calvino train a bit more, which I probably will try in the future. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I would recommend this to any student of literature. I think it's a great way to look at yourself as a student, as a reader, and if you are as a writer, because I think the ideas discussed in here are really quite interesting and quite brilliant. So yes, 100% would recommend picking this up as a student of literature. Next, The Promise. I have it here. No, not there. Right here. The Promise. The 2021 Booker Prize winner, The Promise, by South African author. I started reading this. I had to stop reading it because it hit far too close to home. For those that don't know, I was born in South Africa. I lived there for the majority of my life. And it's obviously set at, it's intergenerational, and it discusses this period of apartheid. And a lot of the stuff, especially in the beginning when it's in sort of the heat of apartheid, sits a bit too close to home, because there's a couple of the characters in here who are characters you will encounter in South Africa today. And it's uncomfortable. It's upsetting. It's really confronting. And that's good. That's what this is meant to be. But it just hit a bit too close to home initially. And I just finished exams and I started reading this and I was like, this is too much for me. I have to pause. I have to put it down. So I did put it down. I read the first part. I put it down and then I came back to it a little bit later. I'm glad that I did, because I actually really enjoyed reading it. I thought it was a great book. But it is one of those books, it does hit a bit too close to home if you are from South Africa. But I think it is a book that everyone should read. I also am interested, for those people that have read this that aren't from South Africa or don't know many South Africans, there's a lot of dialect in here that's very South African. Is that understandable? I suppose I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I sometimes feel like I lose something in the story when it's written in like a native dialect, which adds to the richness of the story, obviously, but maybe I don't understand it as well as someone else would. So I would love to know other people's thoughts about that, because I certainly felt that the dialect and the clear South Africanisms in here really added to the richness of the story. So that's a discussion point. Do let me know in the comments down below what you think about that. Annihilation, my dear friend Katie's favorite book in the entire world, and I read it on her recommendation and I really enjoyed it. I'm not a big sci-fi reader at all, but the atmosphere surrounding this book is fantastic. I love it. I think it is so interesting, so exciting, so questioning in its approach. So yes, will I read the next one? Yes. Will I read the third one? Possibly. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a very, very good read, and I completely recognize why it's Katie's favorite book of all time. So yes, recognition received, Katie. Absolutely. Fane. Can't believe I didn't pick this up from the bookshelves. Oh. Okay, guys, another tomb that I read this year, but Fane, what a fantastic book. This book has everything that you could possibly want in a novel. It is set in the Victorian era. It has gothic elements. It has feminist elements. It has intrigue, mystery, environmental scenes, nature writing, a student that is hungry for knowledge and just wants to go to university but can't. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's got different perspectives. It's told from different points of view halfway through the book. So you kind of get the sense of finding out what's going on slowly but surely. There's small bits that are released to you as you go through the book. And I much prefer that style of writing where you're getting little hints throughout the narrative about what's coming. You're not just like overwhelmed with the sense of understanding at the end, which I feel like so many contemporary novels like Akatar hit. They just delay gratification until right at the end, so you're hooked on reading them. This, on the other hand, is, I suppose, what you would call a slow burn, but a slow burn for the literary critic. It is incredible and written so beautifully. I mean, the language in here is so amazing and so descriptive. You feel that you are wandering along the moors of Scotland. So, one of my best reads of the year? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is one of my best reads of the year. All right, guys, we're getting there, slowly but surely. So, next on the list is Small Things Like These. Wee little book, absolutely incredible. I've really been enjoying my Irish literature lately, and this little book is no exception. I just absolutely love these little bite-sized pieces of literature. This is really a jam-packed book that just sets in sort of a wintry atmosphere straight away. So yes, would recommend. Shortlisted for the Booker Prize 2022. I was not aware of that, but yes, I love that book. So 100%. Next book is a book that I actually didn't love that much. The Vegetarian. There was a scene in this book, and to be fair, I probably should have checked the trigger warnings. There are quite a few in this book. It is quite a dark, disturbing book. It's very well written, I have to say. I think it is brilliantly written, and it's questioning, and it's a great book to read, and I completely understand why some people absolutely love it. And also the Man Booker International Prize 2016 winner. I totally get that. I can see it. I can see the merits of this book. For me personally, there was a scene at the beginning, and it was, for me, it was too traumatic, and I skipped over it, and the rest of the book is very traumatic, and it's really quite a dark exploration of human nature. And I don't know, I think if I didn't feel so shocked or upset at the beginning of this book, I maybe would have felt slightly differently about it, but I didn't. And so I didn't feel very good about this book finishing it. I did finish it. I wasn't going to finish it. I did finish it. I'm glad I finished it, but it's not something that I would recommend or something that I would particularly say is one of my favorite books. So let's move on. The Vegetarian, we have always lived in the castle. This was my sort of October Halloweeny kind of read. And I'm not big on scary thriller kind of books, but Shirley Jackson is brilliant, and this is a classic. And I love this book. I really loved this book. I read it in like a night, and I got so into it. I thought it was so well done. It was exciting and questioning and mysterious, and you're kind of sitting there the whole time being like, well, who murdered the entire family? And you kind of find out right at the end, but it's tied up so beautifully in this really nice package, and you feel an affinity to the characters, even though they're probably really different. And I think that's the mark of true writing, and the amount of suspense and discomfort that you feel the way that Shirley Jackson writes, the words that she chooses, and that sense of suspense that she creates as she writes is so exciting and so brilliant, and something to be admired. So big up from me on We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Then I had another light read, Kaylin's favorite book, A Discovery of Witches. Also a bit chunky, but a really nice sort of academic fun read. Obviously some romance elements in there, which is very, very exciting, and some fantasy elements in there, which is great. But overall, just a really, really nice read. Same thing I will say about this that I said about ACOTAR. You kind of start off, the narrative is a bit thin because you don't have that much detail, and it kind of sticks to being quite thin throughout the book until right at the end, when it starts to get really, really juicy. You start to kind of understand a lot more. And so it keeps you gripped until right at the end, and it obviously ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So you go to read the second book, which I will read and I'm excited to read, but it's just a thing with contemporary fiction at the moment. Instead of like drip feeding you pieces of information so you can start to think about what's going on, you're not given anything until right at the end. But I really enjoyed this. It was a nice read. It was a fun read. It was intriguing. The literary historical references in here were fantastic, and that's what made it for me. A non-fiction read that I just wanted to shout out is In Search of Mary Seacole. This is a biography about Mary Seacole, the Jamaican nurse that served in Crimea. I read this as a part of my research essay that I wrote towards the end of the year this year, and this is the latest biography on her, which has quite complete sources and a quite in-depth review of the sources. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a great insight into a truly phenomenal historical woman. And if you are interested in sort of Victorian Black lives or minority representation literature, this is something I would pick up, because I think it was done really, really well in looking at Mary Seacole's own narrative and debunking a few myths that have come out from that. So, one of my top reads of the year. This is a memoir called Desire, and in it, Jonathan Dollimore talks through his life and his interactions with literature and homosexuality, and it is so well written and so interesting to kind of see how he addresses these elements of his life, and as he comes through it on the other side. I love this. I've never really gotten into biographies or non-fictions or those kind of things, but this just hit differently. I think because he interplays it with a lot of the philosophy, his own philosophy that he has developed in terms of sexual identity. And so I think this was definitely one of my top reads of the year, and definitely not something that I would have read in the past. And so it just goes to show you branch out and something can surprise you. We're getting there, guys. Almost done. Their Eyes Were Watching God. It's a classic. It's a classic for a reason, because it's brilliant. It's brilliantly written. Its characters are phenomenal. It's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I was so close to tears. I was so close to tears in this book. It just gripped me from the get-go, and it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It's a classic for a reason, and I totally get it. I get it. The other big tome that took me forever to read, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, but I love this book. It's Victorian era. It's set in the Victorian era. It's written like a Victorian novel. It's written like it's come out of Dickens, but it's magical realism. It's engaging, it's fun, it's dry, satirical, and it's just all round beautiful. But the thing that got me about this book, which I never end up loving, is the ending. The ending was perfect in this book. There is nothing more that can be said about it. It was absolutely incredible, and definitely one of my top reads of this year. Going on to the top reads pile. I don't actually have a pile. I should have a pile. but we'll get into that. After that tomb, I read this in like an afternoon. Broken Wings. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful language in here. It's incredibly lyrical. It's something that should be in a poetry anthology. It is the kind of love story that is long forgotten and shouldn't be forgotten, because it is so, so beautiful and so lyrical and so heartfelt and spiritual and emotional. So, yes. All right. We're almost there. We're almost done. Book of Not, the second book from Nervous Conditions. That was one of my best reads from last year, and one which I wrote one of my essays on. This one was good. Not as great as Nervous Conditions, but very uncomfortable, which is what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. And at the end of it, you have this bitter resentment, which is what the character feels. And that is good. That is what you need. That is what you want, because that is the purpose of it. I'm very excited to read This Mournable Body, which is the next one, the third one and the final one, because I'm going to be so interested to see how this all kind of wraps itself up, the story. Another non-fiction read, The Vagabond Spirit of Poetry. If you're a literature student, you should read this because it is absolutely brilliant. It's hard going, it's difficult to understand, but if you are a literature student or a literary critic, this is absolutely essential to understanding a different side of poetry and poetry reading and looking at things in an intertextual manner that is so necessary. And it is something every student should read. This little book, Ice, it is so bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. The storyline is bizarre. You're not really sure what's going on, what's real, what's imagination, who is looking after who is searching after who. It's confusing. But I think that's the point, and I think that it achieves the point incredibly well. It's this kind of immersive experience in a tiny little book that just changes where you are in the moment, and it really invests you in the story so brilliantly. So yes, good book, not one of my favorites, not something I'll reread. Then second last book, Celestial Bodies. This was absolutely incredible. Intergenerational narratives focused on women's experiences, and so diverse in its approach, in its ideas, in its understanding, and just something that I think really speaks to our changing world, our changing landscape, how challenging that can be and how scary that can be, and how sometimes it can be detrimental. This was so close to being one of my top reads of the year. I mean, I'm even tempted to just like tilt the weights ever so slightly because I really loved this book and I breezed through it so easily. It's just shy of something, and I can't put my finger on what it's shy of that makes it 5 stars or top reads or whatever you want to call it. But no, I think it's like 4.8, really. All right, guys, last one. This is one of my top reads of the year. This is Thin Places, another Irish writer. Her experience with the Troubles as it relates to her growing up in Derry, up in Northern Ireland, and her healing process and the psychology that she went through in healing from the trauma of her childhood and how she found that in nature. But also integrating this idea of history and language into nature and why it's so important in understanding where we belong in our own narrative and in our own history and in our own experiences. This memoir is so beautifully written, so engaging, so profound. It made me reflect back on my life so much. And I think that's the purpose of it, is it looks at the trauma that people have faced and how we adapt to that and how we address it in a profound way. So I do think this is one of my top reads of the year and something I will absolutely go back to and read again at some point. So that's everything. Those are all the books that I've read this year. There was one last book that I wanted to mention, and the reason I didn't include it in my book list is On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And I know this is going to come as a shock to some people, but I did not finish this book. I put it aside. I couldn't get on board with it. Now, I'm not sure if it's because I was listening to the audiobook of it and I'm better at reading, so maybe I need to give this another go. But I did not finish this, so it did not make the list, but it is something that I started reading this year and stopped for whatever reason. So stick around. I will be doing my 2024 TBR choice, pull together, whatever you want to call it, soon. And I'm going to cut it off there, and I'm going to talk about my top reads in another video, maybe even in a short video on my Instagram or my TikTok. So go ahead and subscribe to those channels down below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. It really helps me out. Every little bit helps. So subscribe, comment, like, all that kind of thing. I would really appreciate it. And thank you for sticking around and talking books with me. I really appreciate it.